Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mystic Path. If you have been watching lately, you know I put up a video on shadow work. Well, after that video, I had so many more downloads come in. And that video was already like an hour long, and it was just kind of like a general video on what shadow work is and why we should do it, right? And like I said, then all this other information started pouring in from my guides and spirit and the universe. So this is going to be a series. We're going to do a shadow work series. So this is shadow work part 2, okay? And in part 1, I had talked about how, our shadow is never going to go away. Our shadow is not something to be ashamed of. I talked about, I think, maybe actually I didn't talk about this because it happened after. I did this video on shadow work where we were talking about how, your shadow is part of you. You're never going to fully get rid of your shadow and just be this like all love and light person with no flaws and no challenges. That's just not how it works, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there that like you should be doing shadow work to clear up your shadow so that you never have shadow aspects again. And that's just not realistic, okay? It's not realistic. It's not what's meant to happen here on Earth, because we talked about in part 1 that, Earth is a school in duality. We only know happy because we know sad. We only know jubilance because we know anger and misery, right? So you're never just going to clear your shadow. And an interesting thing happened to me after I did that video. We were talking in that video about how sometimes your shadow comes up to be seen and you're supposed to love it and accept it, right? I think the title of the last shadow work video we did, part 1, is called Your Shadow's Showing, Can You Love It Unconditionally? Because those were the messages I was getting, is that people are developing this like combative relationship with their shadow, and they think it's like something they need to rid themselves of to be like an enlightened person who is healthy and ascending. And that is not correct. At least I don't believe that is correct. And the downloads I get from source energy in the universe do not support that, right? We come here to the school of Earth to learn. And sometimes there are things we've contracted to learn, right? So, and I think I talked about in the first video, like one of the things I've contracted is pessimism. I was born into a very negative, critical, pessimistic family. Anytime anything good happens, there's always somebody there in the family to jump right up with the shadow side of it. Well, don't be too happy because of this, this, and this, right? And that is something I will continually have to work on, is the pessimism. And the funny thing is, I was called upon to practice what I was preaching to you guys, okay? I did that shadow work video. And then the next couple days, life was fine, normal, whatever, right? Then like the third day, I just woke up like, I guess, on the wrong side of the bed. Although I didn't really feel like I was on the wrong side of the bed when I woke up, right? But as the day went on, everything was like annoying me, irritating. I found, even things I normally find joy in, I was like, ugh, annoying that I have to do this, blah, 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 and I was also feeling my shadow come up. And so I was feeling energetically very like pent up, right? So I was like, man, what is wrong with me? And I kept asking myself most of the morning, like, what is wrong with me today? Why do I feel this way? I just felt like tense, right? And So I was trying to do all these things to like get this energy out, right? I was like, I'm going to go for a run. So I put on my shoes. I went for a run. I'm like, I'm going to run all this energy out so then I can relax and I won't feel this way. And I went for a run. I came back. I still felt that way. I was like, I'm going to read because reading is something I love to do. You'll see I bring a lot of books on the channel. I talk about a lot of books. I recommend a lot of books. And so, again, I thought, well, reading is something I can go escape into a book and then this energy will dissipate because I won't be thinking about it and I'll escape into this book, right? So I go out. The weather here in Florida has been beautiful lately. So I go out on my lanai with my book, and for like 30 minutes, I basically read the same 2 lines over and over again because I cannot focus on the book because the energy inside of me is like not allowing me to escape from it, right? So then I'm like, I'm going to go take a bath. Like I won't bore you with all the things I was doing, but I was basically going through this list of like, how can I get rid of this energy? And then after doing this for about 4 hours, I sat down with myself and just took a pause. No agenda, no plan, right? I wasn't trying to purge the energy. I wasn't trying to release it. I wasn't trying to love it out of myself, right? Honestly, I was just a little bit exacerbated. So I was like, well, I don't really know what else to do at this point because nothing's working. So I'm just going to sit here for a second, breathe. And I chuckle because, that's usually all it takes. And it's so funny as humans that we get ourselves all caught up in all these other things when we could just simply sit down for a second and breathe. So I sat down, closed my eyes, just started focusing on my breath. And suddenly it all just came clear to me. I had so much clarity. I have a shadow element called pessimism. It came up for me that day to be seen. And I had just done a video telling you guys all that when our shadow comes up, sometimes we just have to accept that this is a part of us and this is a challenge that we're going to revisit multiple times in our life. And we need to love ourselves anyway. We need to unconditionally love and accept ourselves despite this shadow element, right? And so as I'm sitting there breathing, it all becomes clear to me that I'm being called to practice what I preach. Like, I started getting these messages from my guides, like, there's nothing you're going to be able to do. You're not going to run out the energy. You're not going to escape from it. You're not going to, lull it into sleeping with a warm bath. But what are you going to do? And I just chuckled out loud because I realized, oh my God, I just did a video on this and now I'm being called to practice what I preach. I was being called to just sit and accept. Pessimism is a shadow element of mine. I will always deal with this. But I do love myself anyway. That does not define me. I know because I've done a lot of work around it, and I have gotten to a place in my life where the pessimism shadow only comes out every once in a while, right? So I'm not like living in pessimism. There are a lot of people that have that shadow element that haven't tamed it, so to speak, I guess, haven't done any work, and they're just always constantly pessimistic, right? They're like those negative Nancys that are always like, well, la, la, la. They're always the people popping your balloon, right? Well, I'm not really one of those people anymore. I used to be one of those people because I was raised to be one of those people in a family of a bunch of people like that, right? So the most amazing thing happened. Once I accepted, you know what? Pessimism is part of my shadow. It's never going to go away. I'm just having a pessimistic day today for whatever reason, and that's okay. And once I did that, once I accepted it, I acknowledged it, and I basically said, and you know what? This doesn't define me. I love who I am anyway. This is just a small part of me. Once I did that, all that pent-up tension and everything inside of me released. And then I wasn't feeling that way anymore. I wasn't feeling so irritable and annoyed by everything. So it made me chuckle because I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do a part 2 to this video to tell the channel and everybody who watches that, we all go through, even, it doesn't matter. I've been doing this kind of work for like 20 years. It does not matter if you've been doing it for 2 days, 20 years, 20 months. You still have to do the work. Stuff will still come up with you, right? Like, I've had years of therapy. I've had years of healing. And I am much, like I said, I no longer live in that pessimistic mood constantly because I've done so much work and I've had so much therapy and I've changed my perspective on a lot of things in life as I've aged and grown. But that doesn't mean I'm immune from my shadow ever coming up to challenge me, right? So I just wanted to share that with you guys. Even those of us giving you guys the advice and trying to help you learn through our experiences, we still have these struggles and we still have these moments, right? And it just makes me like, this is just how the universe works. That, I did that whole video talking about how can you accept your shadow? Can you love your shadow? Can you just be in your shadow without it owning you and controlling you? And then literally like 3 days later, I was challenged to do all of those things. And I'm happy to say I was able to do it successfully. That, again, is because I've done so many years of work. Honestly, 10 years ago, even when my shadow would come up in regards to pessimism, I wouldn't figure it out in 4 hours, okay? It would take me a couple days sometimes of just being an asshole to people and myself before I relented and just accepted that, like, okay, this is just part of it. Now I'm much more practiced at, asking myself, sitting down, asking myself, what's the issue here? What's happening? And so, anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up because that also leads me into Will Smith. In part 1, I talked about how I had just finished reading this book, and it is an amazing book. I still recommend it, of course. And I talked about how this is a great book that describes the journey of shadow work, okay? Because he talks very candidly about his healing, his shadow, things that he's had to deal with and heal, things he's gone to therapy for, things that have caused him self-sabotage in the past because he didn't deal with it, etc. And if you've been on the internet at all in the last couple days, a few days ago at the Oscar, Will Smith smacked Chris Rock over a joke. Okay? And so I honestly feel like part of the reason this happened is because Will is like a global icon. And this happened pretty much in front of half the globe was the viewing audience. And I think this happened so that the universe can show everyone that no one is immune. It does not matter how successful you are, how healthy you are, how much therapy you've had. Your shadow will come out every now and then to challenge you. And if you do not expect it or think, or if you're in your ego and you think that you don't have any more shadow work to do, those are the times that it really comes to get you. Okay? So I wanted to bring this up because after the slap, he won the Oscar and then he went up to give a speech. And he said, Denzel Washington said to me a few moments ago, at your highest moment, be careful. That's when the devil comes for you. Okay? So that's what Denzel Washington said to Will after he slapped Chris Rock. And I wanted to make sure we talked about that today because in regards to shadow work, because that's the truth. Whether you believe it's the devil, your shadow, negative energy, whatever, everybody labels it something different. But the sentiment is the same. When you are at your highest, most successful, most abundant, is when that shadow is going to come out to challenge you. And that's basically what happened to Will Smith this past week. And I'm sure he's having to do a lot of inner work to deal with it and to reconcile what happened and to figure out why did he react that way, because he grew up in a very violent, like watching his parents have a very violent relationship. So he knows that that's an issue and that's a childhood trauma, and he's done a lot of work around that. And so I think that just goes to show that his shadow came up and overtook him when he was at his highest moment and he had let his guard down. And that's why he reacted the way he reacted to Chris Rock, because he was not balanced enough to keep his shadow in check in that moment, right? Because we all know violence is not the answer. Smacking someone is not the answer. Even Will made a statement afterwards apologizing and stating, violence is a poison that can rot everything in your life, and it's not anything, he's not proud of himself. So I just wanted to bring this up because I feel like it's very fitting around these videos I'm doing with shadow work. This is a perfect example of your shadow journey never ends, right? He didn't write this book about his journey of healing and then, or maybe he did. Maybe he did think, well, the book is done. I'm healed now. No more shadow to deal with. Maybe that's why the shadow came up to challenge him, right? But that's just speculation. I don't know Will. I'm not in his head. So I can't really say that, right? That's just like a speculation I'm making. But the point I'm trying to make is, it doesn't matter. You're entire, as long as you are breathing, like I said in my last video, as long as you are breathing, you will be doing shadow work. And I feel like what just happened with Will over this past weekend was a perfect example of that. And then what Denzel said about be careful when you're in at your highest point, the devil comes for you. That I just wanted to kind of remind everyone that, and I'm not suggesting living your life in fear and constant fear that your shadow is going to come and, make you act outside of yourself. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just suggesting that we just need to be aware that as long as you are living, you will have a shadow to contend with. Now, will it be less triggering? Yes, like I was talking about with my pessimism. I'm not nearly as triggered as much as I used to be because I've done so much healing work. And that's what we're going to start talking about in these series, okay? We're going to start talking about what is shadow work? How does doing shadow work benefit us? How can we, what are some ways we can do the shadow work, right? Because I just feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there, and a lot of people just think that doing shadow work means that you're just going to become like this perfect person with no problems and no challenges. And that's just not, right? We're all human. That's just, humans are flawed. We know that. There's never going to be a human being that is all perfect, enlightened, never makes a misstep. That's just not, that's unrealistic expectations, okay? So let's get into it now and get started now that we've kind of talked about those few things. So kind of like I was just saying, I found this little statement on the internet about shadow work, and I kind of wanted to share it with you guys because it's concise. It says, it is important to realize that everything is not meant to be love and light 24/7. Having this expectation of the healing journey will actually set you up for massive disappointment, because much of the journey involves you exploring and coming to terms with some of the deepest and darkest parts of yourself. Learning how to balance your shadow self with love and light is the way to truly maximize on the healing journey. Being too far on either side can throw you off balance and actually can prevent you from doing the work necessary to connect to your highest good. Do not be afraid of your shadow. Embrace it and understand it, right? That's how we get our shadow under control. That's how we heal our shadow, is by embracing it, by loving it anyway, right? What did they say? What did I say in the last video? They channeled to me, your shadow's showing. Can you love it unconditionally? It's like one of my favorite phrases now even when I'm acting out. So like the other day I was acting outside of myself. I was like, okay, Amy, your shadow is showing. You're acting like a grouch. Anyway, so now, what is shadow work actually, right? Okay. Shadow work is a practice of healing and self-growth. It means to heal and grow means you need to surrender and accept. Instead of attacking everything that you may be thinking or feeling, you need to approach your shadow with compassion. Okay? You need to have compassion, forgiveness, and love for yourself, for your mistakes, right? Like I said, I used to really beat myself up when I would have a pessimistic day. I was always like negative self-talking and saying like, God, you're such a piece of shit, or you're so lazy that you're doing this, whatever it was. And and that was not helping me. That would put me into like a shame spiral that would then lead me like deeper and deeper into depression. Excuse me. So we want to, when we're approaching shadow work, we want to do our best. And listen, I know it's easier said than done, okay? Trust me, I know. But we want to kind of approach it with compassion, with forgiveness, with unconditional love towards ourselves, okay? Because the reason why doing shadow work is so important is because it helps us remove the baggage that we carry around with us, right? We all have childhood traumas. We have hurt and pain from past relationships, whether they be romantic, whether they be work related, whether they be friendships, right? And all of those things we carry around with us in our psyche, in our aura. And it makes it hard for us to show up and be our best self when we're carrying around all that heavy baggage, right? It makes our energy dense. It makes us feel lower. It makes us act from the lower vibrations, right? So the reason it's important to do our shadow work is because it will help improve all of our relationships, including the relationship you have with yourself. Okay? Doing shadow work brings awareness to your unconscious and disowned parts of our personality, right? Like I've talked about this before on this channel. We all have parts of ourselves we don't like for me, I don't like the pessimism. I don't like that I also can be controlling sometimes. That's also like a shadow element that I have. I don't love those things about myself, but I do now. I mean, I used to really beat myself up for them and negative self-talk, like I was saying. And I would try to avoid and ignore or suppress the fact that they even existed, right? And that's why people get triggered, because somebody will point out like, oh, you're controlling, or you're kind of negative. And then I would get triggered and I would like lash out at them because I was not doing my shadow work, right? And I would be in this defensive posture because I didn't want to have to admit and accept that these were parts of my personality, right? So doing shadow work is basically bringing when these shadows come up to be seen, we need to see them and we need to, and we're going to go deeper into like how we can see them and heal them. But I just really want to bring to light in this video that we cannot try to run from them, because they can outrun us. Let me tell you, they catch you every time. You do not want to try to run from them. You do not want to try to avoid them. You do not want to ignore them or suppress them, okay? Because what happens when you do that is they grow. And then those issues become much more difficult to deal with and heal than if you dealt with them and healed them when they first came up, right? We kind of talked about that briefly in the first video. I have some notes here I've made. I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anything out, okay? Okay, so this is something I do want to bring up. You know, your shadow is not a flaw or a mistake. Your shadow is part of you. It's a natural part of who you are. Like I just talked about, this shadow has come to you honestly from childhood experiences, societal experiences, experiences with our peers, fights we've had, disagreements, conflict, whatever, insecurities. So all of these things are part of you. And if you view it as like a mistake or a flaw, then you're saying you yourself are a mistake or a flaw. And we all know that that's not. There are no mistakes. Everything happens for a reason. So that's why it's important. We need to accept our shadow and learn how to love and forgive ourselves despite the flaws, despite the shadow, right? So at the heart of all shadow work is going to be developing self-awareness, right? We need to be self-aware of our behaviors, patterns, thoughts before we can accept them with compassion, right? First step is becoming self-aware of our behaviors, how we act, how we behave in situations. If we're in a social situation, for example, and we have conflict with someone else, chances are it's because either our own shadow has come up or their shadow has come up, right? And so we have to be self-aware enough to be able to notice those things so that then we can start doing what's necessary to heal and love and accept those parts of ourselves, right? So this part is very important. Shadow work is not just lighting candles and getting crystals and doing moon rituals, okay? I know a lot of people think that's the case. And you also can't just burn a bunch of sage to get rid of your shadow, all right? These are all kind of things I've seen on the internet where it's like, heal your shadow, and then it's like this ritual, and it's like you're never gonna have to worry about your shadow again. Yeah, no, it's not how it works, people. Okay, so there are important elements to doing shadow work, and usually it's a combination of a bunch of things, right? Therapy is going to be very important in shadow work, whether it's group therapy, individual therapy, whether it is, talking to your friend. Like if you're not ready to go into therapy with an actual professional, then, you may start out slow with your friends and asking them have you noticed what, if you're not self-aware, your friends and your family may be a good place to start. You can ask them what have you noticed about me that's something that's always coming up that causes issue? And they may say you're angry all the time, or you're negative all the time, or you're very defensive, or whatever it is, right? But again, I cannot stress this enough. To do shadow work, you actually have to do the work. That means therapy, individual or group. That means reading self-help books, watching docuseries on self-help and healing. That means learning about, your emotions and the proper tools for dealing with your emotions, okay? And it also can mean getting in touch spiritually with the universe, a deity, whatever your God is. Everybody labels it something different, right? There's over 300 religions in the world, so I'm not picking and choosing. One's not better than the other. They're all going to be helpful for you and yourself, right? Shadow work can be very difficult because, like I said, a lot of the times we avoid it, we ignore it, we suppress it because facing our shadow will shake our perception of ourselves, right? And the desired impression we're making on other people. So it's hard sometimes to be self-aware and admit something is our shadow because we don't want to believe that about, right? Like when I first started doing shadow work, I didn't want to believe about myself that I could be a negative person. And when someone would say that to me, you're very negative, it would trigger the heck out of me because that was shaking my perception of myself. And it was forcing me to look at my perception of myself, right? So also, I want to note that there are traumas that happen sometimes that create shadow elements, and you cannot always work through certain traumas on your own. Sometimes you need a professional. For example, if you, growing up as a child, were sexually abused, physically abused, or witnessed a lot of physical abuse, if, there are people that have been kidnapped, they have been trafficked, those are traumas that you're going to need a professional to help you work through those traumas, especially if you've suppressed them or you yourself have shamed them or people around you have shamed them, right? Like shame is something we use in this world a lot, unfortunately, and it's not healthy. And shame then further keeps people from getting help and doing shadow work because they're ashamed. I'm embarrassed and ashamed that I'm a negative person, as an example, right? So then that makes it harder to ask for help or to go seek out help. So that's also why there are professionals who study the psychology, healing, emotional health, and all of that. There are professionals that study those things for years, and they get degrees and certifications, and they get licenses to treat, and those people have a much better toolbox than you're going to find getting on the internet and trying to do your own shadow work, right? So if there are some serious traumas that have happened to you, there is no shame, but you will probably want to seek out a professional because that will be the healthiest, safest way for you to do shadow work. Okay? And we just want to kind of, I don't want to get too crazy in this video because the first part one was like an hour long, and I want to make these a series where we talk about a lot of different things. So I don't want to make them crazy long. But I just, again, the goal of shadow work is that we can accept our shadow. And once we accept our shadow, we start to see how our thoughts, emotions, patterns, behaviors influence us every day. Like, you don't even realize how much your shadow filters your everyday life until you start to do the work. Like I did not realize how I looked at everything in the world through a very negative filter until 20 years ago. I started doing shadow work, right? And then I could only get so far on my own. So then I started therapy 10 years ago, about 13 years ago. So because I needed a therapist to help me dig in deeper in a safe way. And I recommend it. If you are considering it, oops, sorry. I thought I had do not disturb on here. Anyway, I do recommend therapy. It has helped me immensely. It has changed my life for the better. And, I just want to put that out there. Because sometimes it's nice to have an objective person there that can help us see objectively how our thoughts and emotions and patterns and behaviors are affecting our life, right? Like we were talking about earlier, it's hard to see that sometimes for ourselves because it shakes the perception we have. It shakes the impression we want to make on people. So, just keep that in mind, because the goal is, when you start accepting your shadow and doing this work and loving yourself compassionately, and what happens is you start to live and show up in your life more authentically. You start to really show up as your authentic self. At least I know for me, there's very little that can shake me off my foundation now, because I've done so much work. Like, I know who I am. And so there's nobody that's going to sway me one way or the other. I know who I am. I'm strong in myself, and I show up in the world as myself. It makes life a lot better, and it does empower your life. You get to live more deliberately and more consciously, and you're happier. At least I became much happier because I didn't feel like those shadow elements were controlling me anymore. Okay? Let me check my notes here and see. Okay. So just like I was saying about authentically showing up. Once you start to authentically show up in your life, you can not only improve your physical health, it improves both your emotional and mental health as well. And believe it or not, when you improve your emotional and physical health, your emotional and mental health, your physical health also improves. People don't realize that negative, low vibration emotions and thoughts and patterns can make you physically sick. And I have an example of that. A decade ago, I got a divorce. I was in a mentally abusive relationship with a narcissist. I was married, and we had been together for 7 years, and as time went on, things just got worse and worse, and I was unhappier and unhappier, and I knew that I needed to get out of this relationship, but it's like I just didn't have the strength. So I was ignoring it. My gut, every part of my soul was telling me, get out of this relationship. And, every time I'd have that feeling, I'd have a million excuses why. Like, we own a bunch of property together. We've lived together for so long. All of our money's tied up together. I had this list of things, right? And so those were all the reasons I would tell myself why it's just easier to stay. And what ended up happening was, the longer I ignored that and repressed it, the sicker my body started shutting down. I started having female problems that nobody could explain. Not to be gross, but I was literally bleeding for like a year straight. I went to specialists. I went to, one of my female doctors was one of the best, female OBGYNs in the world. No, I had all these tests. I had exploratory surgery. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. Nobody. And they all kept saying, this doesn't make any sense. We can't really find anything wrong. But I was clearly having problems, and my body was shutting down, and I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And this went on for about 6 months, probably. The getting sicker. I was bleeding for a year, but then for 6 months, it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And coincidentally, my relationship was getting worse and worse and worse and worse, right? And so I reached this breaking point where I just couldn't do it anymore. And I asked my husband for a divorce. I got a lawyer. I asked him for a divorce. And no joke, the very next day I stopped bleeding and all of the problems went away. and I have not had a female problem in a decade. And even my OBGYN, because I go every year for checkups, right? She even says, this is crazy that you've never had another female problem again. And I know in my soul that was how my physical body was getting ill, because I was ignoring my mental and emotional bodies. I was ignoring my soul. I was ignoring what I knew I needed to do. And so my body was like, okay, if you don't care that we're this miserable, then we don't care either, right? So then my body just started shutting down. And when I finally found the courage to do what I knew I needed to do, it all just went away and I got better, and I've not had a female problem in a decade. So honestly, you guys, I can tell you, doing shadow work will benefit you in so many ways, right? Doing shadow work, working on our mental and emotional health is a key part of living. Okay? These are also key parts of developing self-awareness. And you need to be able to be introspective and self-aware to grow as a person. Okay? I'm going to wrap this up today because we're already at 41 minutes, and this is going to be a series. So come back for part 3. We will continue to talk more about this. And in part 3, we're going to start really talking about like the changes you can see in your life when you do your shadow work, right? Well, actually, let's just talk about a few of them real quick before we go. Okay? When you start to do your shadow work and heal, you will gain more confidence and self-esteem. Check. I can say that's true from experience. Your creativity will improve. You will build better relationships with others. You will be better at self-love and self-acceptance. Your overall wellness, physical, emotional, and mental, will all be more balanced and improve. You will increase your capacity for compassion, and you'll have a lot more clarity. Like, I have a lot of people who ask me, like, how is it you're able to channel messages from the universe? And I can honestly tell you, the more I cleared out my trauma and healed it and accepted and loved my shadow and did shadow work, the clearer my gifts became. And because now I've been doing it for like 20 years, my gifts are so honed, I can sometimes just meet a stranger and immediately be able to get a energy read on them, because that's how clear the clarity comes in when you've healed out all of those low vibration things that hold you back. Okay? So we're going to leave it here. I hope to see you come back for part 3. And please like, share, and subscribe. I'm trying to grow the channel. Please comment below if you find any of this helpful. And then we'll see you next time for part 3. Have a wonderful rest of your day, rest of your week, weekend. Namaste.